There's a book out there that claims to reveal the truth about death, but cracking it feels impossible. Every page is a maze of bizarre symbols, twisted passages, and riddles that seem designed to keep secrets hidden. What if it holds secrets that could flip everything we know about the afterlife upside down? The more you try to understand it, the deeper you get lost. It's like the answers are just out of reach. So, what's hidden in these pages? And why does it feel like you're not supposed to know? A mysterious book with endless secrets. The Bardo Thodol, widely known as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, is more than just an ancient text. It's a gateway into one of humanity's most mysterious journeys, the afterlife. Imagine a guidebook that claims to show you the way through death itself, with instructions for navigating the unknown. Sounds like something out of a fantasy, right? But this book has its roots in centuries-old Tibetan Buddhist teachings and offers wisdom that still captivates minds today. Its origin story, its discovery, and its strange journey into the modern world are filled with as much intrigue as the text itself. The story begins in the mist-shrouded mountains of Tibet during the 8th century. This was a time when Buddhism was just beginning to take root in the region. At the heart of it all was Padmasambhava, a Buddhist master revered for his supernatural abilities and deep understanding of the human mind. Think of him as a spiritual pioneer who blended Indian tantric traditions with ancient Tibetan beliefs. According to legend, Padmasambhava didn't just write the Bardo Thodol and leave it for everyone to read. Instead, he hid it, literally. He concealed the text as a terma, or a hidden treasure, to be discovered only when the time was right. So why hide such valuable teachings? Tibetan tradition believes that certain truths are too powerful to be revealed all at once. They had to be safeguarded until the world was ready to understand them. These termas were hidden in caves, beneath rocks, or even embedded in the minds of special people called tertans, or treasure revealers. The Bardo Thodol remained buried for centuries, waiting to be found. Then, in the 14th century, a Tibetan monk named Karma Lingpa stumbled upon the hidden text. He was no ordinary monk. He was a tertan, destined to reveal this treasure to the world. On the slopes of Mount Gampoder in southern Tibet, he uncovered the Bardo Thodol. To believers, this was no random discovery. It was fate. The book was finally ready to guide people through one of life's greatest mysteries. The name Bardo Thodol means liberation through hearing in the intermediate state. But what does that really mean? In Tibetan Buddhism, the Bardo refers to the in-between state, the strange transitional phase between death and rebirth. According to the teachings, the soul passes through multiple bardos, each offering a chance for liberation or a trap that leads to another cycle of rebirth. The text was meant to be read aloud to the dying or the dead, guiding them through these stages. The idea was that even after death, the soul remains aware and can benefit from advice. Imagine someone whispering directions to you while you're lost in a dark forest. That's what this book aims to do for the soul. The book is divided into sections that describe different stages of the afterlife. First comes the moment of death, where the soul experiences the clear light of reality. If the soul recognizes this light, it can achieve immediate enlightenment. But if it doesn't, the journey continues. Next, the soul enters a state filled with visions of deities, both peaceful and terrifying. These aren't just religious figures. They're symbols of the mind's inner struggles. If the soul understands that these visions are just projections of its own mind, it can move closer to freedom. Finally, the soul reaches the stage where it chooses its next life. Based on karma, the sum of one's actions, the soul is drawn to different realms. The goal is to break free from this cycle, but the pull toward rebirth is strong. These vivid descriptions aren't just spooky bedtime stories. They're packed with symbolism, offering deep psychological insight. What if the deities and demons aren't external forces, but reflections of our deepest fears and desires? The text challenges readers to confront the reality of their own minds, making it as much a psychological guide as a spiritual one. For centuries, the Bardo Thodol remained a hidden gem of Tibetan culture. But in the early 20th century, it found its way to the Western world, thanks to an American scholar named Walter Evans Wentz. In 1927, Evans Wentz, who was fascinated by Eastern spirituality, worked with a translator named Lama Kazi Dawa Samdup to produce the first English version of the text. They titled it the Tibetan Book of the Dead, a name that stuck, even though it wasn't an exact translation. The title was meant to draw comparisons to the Egyptian Book of the Dead, another ancient guide for the afterlife. When Evans Wentz's translation hit the shelves, it sparked curiosity and debate. Western audiences, already intrigued by mysticism, were fascinated by the idea of a manual for the afterlife. Thinkers like Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, praised the book for its insights into the human mind. He believed that the vivid imagery of the Bardo states mirrored the struggles of the unconscious mind. To Jung, the Bardo Thodol wasn't just about death. It was about understanding the depths of human psychology. Fast forward to the 1960s, and the Bardo Thodol took on a new life. The counterculture movement, with its focus on expanding consciousness, latched onto the book's themes. Timothy Leary, the controversial psychologist and psychedelic advocate, adapted the book's principles for his own explorations of the mind. He even co-wrote The Psychedelic Experience, which used the Bardo stages as a metaphor for ego death during psychedelic trips. Suddenly, an ancient Tibetan text was influencing a whole generation of people exploring the boundaries of their minds. But with fame came misunderstanding. Western interpretations often oversimplified the book's teachings, stripping them of their rich cultural and religious context. The practice of reading the text aloud to the dying, for example, is deeply rooted in Tibetan Buddhist rituals. Taken out of that context, it risks becoming just another mystical curiosity. Scholars have pointed out that the book isn't a literal map of the afterlife. Instead, it's a guide to understanding consciousness and the process of letting go. Yet, even with these misunderstandings, the Bardo Thodol remains as captivating as ever. Why does a book about death still fascinate us so much? Maybe because it challenges us to think about what happens next. It asks us to confront the unknown and offers the hope that death isn't the end, but a transformation. Today, the Bardo Thodol continues to be a living tradition in Tibetan Buddhist communities. Monks still read it aloud during funerary rites, guiding souls through the afterlife. At the same time, it continues to intrigue modern seekers, offering timeless wisdom about life, death, and the mind. However, the fascination with the Tibetan Book of the Dead didn't stop with its translation and Western popularity. Scholars, psychologists, and spiritual seekers wanted more than just stories of the afterlife. They wanted to understand the deeper truths behind the text. What did these teachings reveal about the mind, death, and human experience? The hidden wisdom of the Bardo Thodol. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, or Bardo Thodol, is a guide to understanding life, consciousness, and everything in between. For centuries, this ancient book has been puzzling and fascinating readers around the world. Its teachings don't just speak about what happens after death, but about how we can understand and transform our minds while we're still living. The text is filled with symbols and cryptic messages, and though they may seem confusing at first, they hold the keys to unlocking deep truths about our inner selves. At the heart of the Bardo Thodol is its rich uses of symbols. These aren't just random images or abstract concepts. They serve as windows into deeper, hidden meanings. What if the symbols weren't just decorations, but tools for understanding the way our minds work? The book is full of colors, deities, animals, and even sounds, all of which carry powerful significance. The use of color, for example, is particularly striking. The clear light of reality, a key idea in the book, is often depicted as a brilliant light that represents a state of ultimate clarity and awareness. It's a colorless light, but it symbolizes the purest form of consciousness, a state that transcends everything we know about our normal reality. But it's not just light that holds meaning. The Bardo Thodol frequently mentions deities, some of whom are peaceful and others terrifying. Could these gods actually be reflections of our deepest fears and desires? The peaceful deities represent the higher, compassionate parts of our minds, while the terrifying ones symbolize the inner struggles and darker emotions that we try to avoid. In other words, the deities aren't literal beings. They're symbolic representations of our inner psychological battles. By confronting these figures, we confront our own minds, our hopes, our fears, and everything that holds us back from spiritual freedom. The imagery in the Bardo Thodol doesn't stop with the visual symbols. It also includes sound, which plays a crucial role in its teachings. Imagine being able to hear something that could guide you to enlightenment, even after death. That's one of the key ideas behind the Bardo Thodol's use of sound. The text was traditionally read aloud, especially to the dying, because it was believed that the soul could still hear and benefit from the teachings after death. In Tibetan Buddhist thought, sound is more than just noise. It's a powerful force that can transform consciousness. The spoken words are thought to have a vibrational quality that affects the listener on a spiritual level. The sound of the teachings, when heard with the right intention, has the power to break through ignorance and help the soul move toward liberation. These symbols and messages all point toward one central idea. The mind is the key to everything. The Bardo Thodol asks us to examine the mind itself, to understand how it works, how it creates our perception of the world, and how it holds us trapped in cycles of fear, desire, and confusion. What if everything we experience is just a projection of our minds? The book suggests that the mind is not a passive observer of reality, but an active creator of it. By understanding how our minds shape the world around us, we can begin to break free from the mental patterns that keep us stuck. This idea of the mind as a creator is central to the teachings of the Bardo Thodol. The book uses its symbolic language to guide the reader into a deeper understanding of how the mind functions. It shows how the mind, through its projections and attachments, can create suffering, but it also holds the potential for liberation. In the Bardo Thodol, the world is not a fixed external reality, but something that can be shaped and transformed through the mind. This is a radically different way of thinking, one that challenges many of the assumptions we make about reality. It suggests that by transforming the way we perceive the world, we can change our entire experience of life. For centuries, scholars and spiritual seekers have tried to decode the Bardo Thodol symbols and teachings. Why does this book continue to fascinate and puzzle people? The answer lies in the depth of its messages. While it may be easy to dismiss the Bardo Thodol as just an ancient text about death, its teachings are about much more than that. They're about the mind, about consciousness, and about the nature of reality itself. These are questions that have puzzled philosophers and spiritual teachers for centuries. The Bardo Thodol provides a unique lens through which we can explore these questions, offering a path to deeper understanding. The cryptic nature of the Bardo Thodol can make it difficult to fully understand. But this difficulty isn't a barrier. It's an invitation to go deeper. The book doesn't just give us answers. It encourages us to ask questions, confront our own ignorance, and to challenge our assumptions about the world. Every symbol, every word, carries the potential for revelation. For those who are willing to engage with its teachings, the Bardo Thodol offers a way to understand the mind and consciousness in ways that are beyond what we typically experience in our daily lives. Perhaps one of the most significant aspects of the Bardo Thodol is how it invites us to transform the mind. It's not enough to simply understand the teachings on a theoretical level. To truly benefit from them, we must apply them to our own lives. This is where the challenge lies. It's one thing to understand the symbols, but it's another to embody the wisdom they represent. The Bardo Thodol isn't a passive text. It's an active guide that encourages us to change the way we think, feel, and experience the world. The teachings of the Bardo Thodol are deeply intertwined with Tibetan Buddhist philosophy, yet their reach extends far beyond Buddhism. The book speaks to universal truths about the mind, consciousness, and human experience. It shows us how our minds shape our perception of the world, how our attachments to things can lead to suffering, and how we can break free from these cycles to experience a more liberated way of being. What would it mean to live without the constraints of fear, attachment, and ignorance? This is the question the Bardo Thodol poses, and it invites us to seek the answers within ourselves. By exploring the cryptic symbols and messages of the Bardo Thodol, we are invited to look deeper into the nature of our minds. The book isn't just about death. It's about understanding life itself. It's about recognizing that the way we perceive the world is shaped by our minds, and that by transforming our consciousness, we can transform our experience of reality. Through its symbols, its teachings, and its messages, the Bardo Thodol offers us a path towards spiritual liberation, a path that begins with understanding our own minds and continues with the courage to transcend them. Along with the deep messages, symbols, and countless deities, the Tibetan Book of the Dead also delves into something that has captured the attention of many: the stages of death. But what exactly are these stages, and why are they so significant? The stages describe the soul's journey after death, offering a roadmap through the confusing and often overwhelming process of the afterlife. Each stage is said to present the soul with challenges, illusions, and choices that can either lead to liberation or reincarnation. The question remains, can the soul truly navigate these stages and escape the endless cycle of rebirth? Or is it doomed to remain caught in the cycle forever? The Tibetan Book of the Dead is like a map for the soul's journey through the final stages of life, offering wisdom for how to move through the space between life and the afterlife. The teachings describe the process in vivid, even intense detail, but at its heart, it offers a thoughtful message about the power of awareness. But what happens when we die, and how do we truly navigate the unknown? According to the Bardo Thodol, the soul goes through several stages that are more than just symbolic. They are a direct reflection of the mind and consciousness. When death comes, the first stage the soul encounters is known as the clear light of reality. Imagine being enveloped in an intense, all-encompassing light, one that is pure and untainted by the distractions of the physical world. This stage marks the ultimate reality, a state of awareness that many are unable to recognize because of their attachments to the ego and earthly life. The text emphasizes that if the soul sees this light for what it is, it can achieve enlightenment right there and then. But for most, this clarity is fleeting. The soul, unprepared, is pulled into the subsequent stages of confusion and distraction. After the clear light, the soul encounters a variety of visions and deities. These aren't just supernatural beings. They are a reflection of the soul's mental state. Some of these deities appear peaceful, embodying wisdom and compassion, while others are wrathful, representing fear, anger, and other negative emotions. The Bardo Thodol warns that if the soul fails to recognize these figures as projections of its own mind, it could fall into a trap, overwhelmed by fear and confusion. The deities, while vivid and intense, are not real external forces, but rather symbolic representations of inner turmoil and mental patterns. So, what does this mean for us? In the context of death, these visions show the soul's struggle with its own psyche. It's as if the deceased is trapped in a dream, struggling to distinguish between reality and illusion. As the soul continues through the Bardo, it faces even more challenges. The soul is now surrounded by a whirlwind of visions and karmic projections from its past lives. These are moments where the soul must confront the results of its own actions, the good, the bad, and everything in between. The more attached a person was to their desires, fears, and worldly attachments, the more intense these projections will be. These experiences can pull the soul further away from liberation unless it is able to recognize that they are just illusions, not the ultimate reality. This stage is about breaking free from the grip of the past, which can be a powerful force, trying to draw the soul back into the cycle of rebirth. When the soul moves through the final stages, it faces its choice: rebirth. This moment is perhaps the most critical. It's where the soul can either escape the cycle of reincarnation or be drawn into it once again. The Bardo Thodol explains that the soul, having gone through all the previous stages, is now at a crossroads. It can choose a new life based on its karma, either one that will lead to further suffering or one that might offer the chance for spiritual growth. But the desire for life and rebirth is strong. How can the soul resist the pull of reincarnation when everything it knows, everything it desires, is urging it back into the cycle? The text challenges us to recognize the ultimate goal, liberation from this cycle of birth and death. To break free, the soul must realize the impermanence of all things, including itself. The stages described in the Bardo Thodol are not merely about what happens after death. They offer a guide for the living as well. The text teaches that the way we approach life, the thoughts we entertain, and the emotions we experience will shape our experience of death. The soul's journey is an internal one as much as it is an external one. By preparing the mind through meditation and mindfulness, we can better face the death process when it comes. So, is it possible to prepare for death while we're still alive? According to the Bardo Thodol, it is absolutely essential. The more prepared the mind is to recognize the illusions of the Bardo, the more likely the soul is to achieve liberation. The journey through the stages of death, as described in the Bardo Thodol, is not something that happens just once. It's a process that happens over and over again. Each stage is a metaphor, not only for what happens after death, but also for the personal and spiritual struggles we face throughout our lives. The text encourages readers to look inward, to confront their deepest fears and attachments, and to develop the awareness that will allow them to transcend them. The ultimate goal is to achieve enlightenment and escape the endless cycle of rebirth. But the process requires deep understanding, awareness, and transformation. This book offers a profound map for navigating the journey through life and death. It shows us that death is not an end, but a transition, a moment where the soul has the opportunity to recognize its true nature. What happens next is up to the soul, but the path to liberation is paved with awareness and understanding. The teachings contained in the Bardo Thodol remind us that while death may seem like the ultimate unknown, it is also the ultimate opportunity to break free from the cycle of suffering and to awaken to the true nature of reality. Rebirth, the concept of being born again after death, is at the heart of many Eastern philosophies, particularly in Buddhism. It's not just a simple idea, but a deep reality that guides how people live, die, and everything in between. For Buddhists, this cycle of birth, life, death, and reincarnation is called samsara, and it's something that everyone is trapped in unless they achieve liberation. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, or Bardo Thodol, explores this idea in depth, revealing how actions and thoughts in one life shape the journey of the soul in the next. But how does the text describe the cycle of rebirth, and how does it help one navigate it? The book offers more than just a philosophy. It's a manual for navigating the afterlife and, crucially, the spiritual journey that unfolds with each rebirth. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, rebirth is viewed as something that isn't random. It's the result of karma, the law of cause and effect. Every action, whether big or small, creates an imprint on the soul. These imprints determine the future course of a soul's journey, including its next life. Can one's life actions truly dictate what happens after death? According to the text, absolutely. The choices we make, the desires we nurture, and the intentions behind our actions all leave a trace. This karmic blueprint will direct the soul toward a new existence that reflects these past deeds. So, in essence, the way you live today can shape who you become in your next life, which is why the Tibetan Book of the Dead places such emphasis on living a mindful, aware life. The text doesn't just stop with a basic understanding of karma. It goes further to explain that the soul's journey doesn't end at death. After death, the soul enters the Bardo, a transitional state between death and rebirth. What happens to the soul during the Bardo? The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes the Bardo as a confusing and sometimes terrifying realm, where the soul is bombarded with visions, sounds, and encounters that can lead to either liberation or further entanglement in samsara. If the soul recognizes the clear light of reality, it can achieve freedom, but most souls fail to grasp this opportunity and are pulled back into the cycle of rebirth. During the Bardo, the soul encounters a range of experiences, from terrifying apparitions to welcoming figures that represent different aspects of the mind. These experiences are meant to help the soul understand the nature of its attachments and desires, which in turn influence the soul's next life. The nature of rebirth is not only about the soul being reborn into a new life, it's about the continuation of its spiritual evolution. The Tibetan Book of the Dead teaches that this cycle of rebirth is both an opportunity and a challenge. Why does the soul continue to cycle through these lives? The answer lies in the soul's inability to break free from its attachments, desires, and ignorance. The text suggests that it's these very attachments that keep the soul bound to samsara. The soul's task is to break free from these attachments, to transcend the cycle altogether. However, the Bardo presents an opportunity for liberation. The soul can achieve clarity and recognition of the true nature of reality, but this requires an awareness of the illusion of self and the impermanence of life. Yet, most souls do not achieve this clarity. Instead, they are reborn, often in a new existence that mirrors their past attachments. What does this mean for the soul? The Tibetan Book of the Dead explains that rebirth into different realms, whether a human realm or one of suffering, depends on the soul's karmic imprint. For instance, a person who lived with hatred and anger may find themselves reborn in a realm filled with conflict and turmoil, while a soul filled with compassion and wisdom might be reborn into a peaceful and harmonious existence. These realms are not fixed. They are fluid, reflecting the mental and emotional states of the soul at the time of death. But how does the soul experience these realms? The Tibetan Book of the Dead teaches that they are not physical places in the traditional sense, but mental states, projections of the soul's desires and attachments. Are these realms just a metaphor for the mind's struggles, or do they have a deeper significance? The text leans toward the latter, explaining that these realms are projections of the mind's inclinations. They are shaped by one's past actions and thoughts. The idea is that the soul's karma pulls it into these realms, and once there, it can either transform or get stuck in that state. It is within these realms that the soul continues its journey, but whether it evolves or becomes more entrenched in samsara depends on its ability to understand its own nature. Rebirth, however, is not just a process that happens after death. It is also an ongoing spiritual journey. The Tibetan Book of the Dead suggests that each life provides an opportunity for the soul to advance on its path to liberation. What does it take for the soul to evolve spiritually? According to the text, it's all about understanding the impermanence of existence and overcoming the false sense of self. By recognizing the illusions that bind the soul, like attachment, aversion, and ignorance, the soul can begin to break free from samsara. This understanding is the key to spiritual evolution, and each rebirth provides another chance to learn, grow, and move closer to liberation. Ultimately, the Tibetan Book of the Dead offers not just a map for what happens after death, but also a guide for how to live in the present. The teachings urge individuals to live with awareness, to recognize that their thoughts, words, and actions shape not only their current life, but their future existence. So, how can this understanding of rebirth affect the way we live? The book encourages mindfulness in every moment, a constant awareness that each action carries consequences, not just for today, but for all of our tomorrows. The key, the text suggests, is to live in a way that aligns with wisdom and compassion, knowing that every choice has the potential to either bind the soul further to the cycle of samsara or set it on the path into liberation. By understanding rebirth through the lens of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, we see that it's not only about the afterlife, but also about the life we lead today, the choices we make, and how we prepare ourselves for the next chapter of our journey. The cycle of rebirth is not something to fear, but something to understand. It's a reminder that our actions and our thoughts shape the world we live in, and that we have the power to transform ourselves at any moment. Through this awareness, we can begin to transcend the limitations of samsara, break free from the endless cycle of rebirth, and reach the ultimate goal: liberation. But breaking the cycle of rebirth isn't as straightforward as it may first seem. Can everyone achieve spiritual liberation? The Tibetan Book of the Dead presents the idea of spiritual liberation as an achievable goal, but the reality is far more complex. While the teachings provide a roadmap for transcending the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, the process requires strong dedication, deep wisdom, and spiritual preparation, things that take time and effort to cultivate. Is it possible to break free from this cycle without years of discipline? The truth is that although liberation is attainable, it's not something that can be achieved passively. Every thought, action, and attachment we hold on to during our lives affects the future journey of our soul. The attachment to worldly desires, fears, and the illusion of self is what keeps us bound to samsara, perpetuating the cycle of rebirth. But how does one begin to untangle these bonds that tie us down? In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it's clear that the key to breaking this cycle lies in mindfulness, meditation, and spiritual wisdom. Meditation, specifically, is seen as a powerful tool for gaining clarity and understanding of the mind's true nature. The book encourages practitioners to meditate on the impermanence of all things, recognizing that nothing, whether it's physical possessions, relationships, or even ideas of the self, remains constant. The very nature of existence is change, and this realization is central to achieving liberation. But, as many have found, it's easier said than done. What makes it so hard to detach from the things we hold so dearly? At the core, the challenge lies in our attachment to identity. We form our sense of self through experiences, memories, and the roles we play in life. Letting go of this identity is not simple. The Tibetan Book of the Dead teaches that without releasing these attachments, we are unable to see the truth of our nature. How can we even begin to let go of something so fundamental to who we think we are? The process requires courage, as it challenges the very foundation of our reality. But the text emphasizes that this is the only way to transcend the cycle of samsara. Even if one can recognize the truth of the clear light during the Bardo, the intermediate state between death and rebirth, liberation is still not guaranteed. What happens if the soul misses this moment of clarity? The Tibetan Book of the Dead reveals that many souls fail to recognize the clear light, which leads them to be distracted by illusory visions and forces within the Bardo, pushing them into another cycle of birth and death. These illusions aren't just external. Often, they reflect the inner workings of the mind, including unresolved fears and desires that bind the soul to its past lives. That's why the book emphasizes preparing for death while still alive, so that when the time comes, the soul can recognize and embrace this opportunity for liberation. So, if the cycle of rebirth is so difficult to break, is liberation something that can only be attained by a few? Not necessarily. The Tibetan Book of the Dead teaches that anyone can break free from samsara, but the path requires conscious effort. By living with awareness, cultivating compassion, and understanding the impermanence of life, one can gradually transcend the illusions of the self and experience true freedom. The teachings make it clear that while it may be challenging, the door to liberation is open to all who are willing to walk the path of wisdom and understanding. Breaking free from samsara is not about escaping life or death. It's about transcending the attachments that define us. The Tibetan Book of the Dead shows us that the path to liberation lies in seeing beyond the temporary nature of our existence and recognizing the eternal truth of our consciousness. But this takes more than just intellectual knowledge. It requires genuine transformation at the deepest levels of the mind. It's about learning to see the world through a different lens, free from the grasp of fear and attachment. Ultimately, The teachings found in the Tibetan Book of the Dead offer a blueprint for personal spiritual evolution. They remind us that liberation is not a far-off, unreachable goal. It is an ongoing process that begins in the present moment. Breaking the cycle of rebirth is about shedding the layers of illusion that keep us bound to the material world. And this journey can only begin when we fully embrace the impermanence of life. However, in other religions, the concept of death is not very similar to the one described in the Bardo Thodol. For example, in Christianity, death is often seen as a final transition to an eternal afterlife, with either heaven or hell awaiting the soul. But is death truly that simple? Do we only face judgment, or is there a deeper, more complex journey that unfolds beyond this life, as the Bardo suggests? What is the reality of death in other religions? The concept of death holds different meanings across the world's major religions, each offering a unique perspective on what happens when life ends. In some faiths, death is a definitive moment of judgment, while others see it as a transition, a process, or even a new beginning. One religion that presents a particularly complex view of death is Tibetan Buddhism, with its spiritual guide, the Bardo Thodol, or Tibetan Book of the Dead, which introduces the idea of the Bardo, a liminal space between death and rebirth. But how do other religions compare in their understanding of death and the afterlife? If we talk about the Egyptian Book of the Dead, also known as the Book of Coming Forth by Day, offers a fascinating glimpse into how ancient Egyptians viewed death, the afterlife, and the soul's journey. Unlike many modern religious texts, the Egyptian Book of the Dead is not a single, unified work, but a collection of spells, prayers, and rituals that served as a guide for the deceased as they journeyed through the underworld, known as the Duat. It was intended to help the soul navigate the perilous afterlife, avoiding the dangers that might threaten it, and ensuring it could reach the judgment of Osiris, the god of the afterlife, in order to achieve eternal life. So, what does the Book of the Dead reveal about the afterlife? The text outlines a journey through the underworld, where the deceased must pass a series of tests, each designed to prove their worthiness for the afterlife. One of the most famous parts of the Book of the Dead is the weighing of the heart ceremony. In this ritual, the heart of the deceased is weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. If the heart is found to be heavier than the feather, it means the soul is burdened by sins, and it is devoured by Amet, a fearsome creature with the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. However, if the heart balances with the feather, the deceased is granted passage into the afterlife to live forever in peace with the gods. But what does this journey mean in terms of spiritual significance? The journey depicted in the Egyptian Book of the Dead is one of transformation and purification. As the soul moves through the various stages of the underworld, it must recite spells to protect itself from various creatures, illusions, and challenges. These spells offer guidance for how to avoid being tricked or devoured by monsters, how to speak the names of the gods correctly, and how to ensure that the deceased is recognized by the gods. It is a process that mirrors the transformation of the soul, much like the Tibetan Bardo Thodol, where the soul must confront its fears and illusions to attain a higher state of being. The Egyptian concept of judgment, like the Tibetan concept, stresses the importance of personal actions and spiritual purity in ensuring a successful passage into the afterlife. This view of death as a transition is quite different from that in many other religions. In Christianity, death is typically seen as the end of earthly life, followed by either eternal life in heaven or eternal separation from God in hell. The Christian perspective is focused on judgment. After death, each person's deeds during their lifetime are evaluated, and they are assigned to their final destination based on their faith and actions. Unlike the Bardo Thodol, which suggests a process of spiritual progression or regression, Christianity presents a final, irrevocable judgment. Heaven or hell becomes the soul's permanent home, and the soul's journey after death is more about being rewarded or punished rather than navigating through a bardo to reach liberation. But what if there's more to it? In Islam, death is also followed by judgment, but there is a slight twist in the details. Muslims believe that after death, the soul enters a waiting period known as barzakh, a realm that some liken to the bardo. In this state, the soul experiences peace or punishment based on its actions in life. However, the soul's ultimate fate is decided on the Day of Judgment, when everyone will be resurrected and judged. This realm of barzakh is similar to the bardo in the sense that it's an in-between stage, but it's more focused on waiting for the final reckoning. Unlike the Tibetan view, which offers the possibility of enlightenment and liberation, the Islamic tradition focuses on the eventual judgment day and final destinations in paradise or hell. But is there a common thread in these religions? While Christianity and Islam emphasize final judgment and eternal destinations, both with relatively little room for change after death, the idea of an intermediate state is more prominent in both Tibetan Buddhism and Hinduism. Hinduism, like Tibetan Buddhism, views death as part of a larger cycle of reincarnation. The soul is said to be reborn based on the karma accumulated in past lives. However, unlike Tibetan Buddhism, which emphasizes the bardo as a stage where the soul can break free or fall into rebirth, Hinduism is more concerned with the accumulation of karma and how it affects the soul's next life. The ultimate goal in Hinduism is to achieve moksha, or liberation from the cycle of samsara, which is similar to the Tibetan Buddhist concept of enlightenment. Yet, while both traditions see death as part of an ongoing journey, the way each religion frames this journey is quite different. The major difference between the Tibetan Buddhist view of death and other world religions lies in the emphasis on spiritual progression and the possibility of enlightenment or liberation. Christianity and Islam focus on a final judgment, where the soul's actions determine its eternal fate. Hinduism and Tibetan Buddhism, however, offer a more cyclical view, where death is part of an ongoing process that can lead to further lives or spiritual liberation. The bardo in Tibetan Buddhism is unique in its detailed exploration of the soul's journey after death, offering a path to break free from the cycle of reincarnation. In contrast, most other religions focus on the finality of death and the soul's ultimate destination. Could there be a deeper understanding that ties these views together? Ultimately, these diverse views all try to answer the same question: what happens after we die? Whether it's about final judgment, waiting in a limbo-like state, or transitioning through different realms, each religion offers a way for followers to make sense of life, death, and the afterlife. The Bardo Thodol provides a particularly fascinating lens through which to view death, offering a framework that invites individuals to engage actively in the process instead of simply waiting for a final destination. While the journey through death may look different in each tradition, the underlying message remains the same. What we do in life matters, and it shapes what happens after death. So, do you believe the journey after death is something we actively navigate, as the Tibetan Book of the Dead suggests? Or is it more about waiting for final judgment? Do these different views on death change the way we live our lives? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing content.